Welcome back everyone. In the past month I was only doing Lies of P and Lords of the Fallen videos, but I decided it is enough with the Souls likes for me and I should go back to the real deal. So just like the title indicates, I will do a full Souls series including Dark Souls 1, 2, 3 and Elden Ring. I will skip Demon Souls and Bloodborne in this series simply because I don't own a PlayStation, and for Sekiro I will come up with a fancy challenge run once this challenge is over. I decided to start with Elden Ring since it will be the most painful and the longest game in the challenge. To put it in perspective, Lies of P's no weapon run took me about 11 or 12 hours to finish. Lords of the Fallen's bucket run took about 8 hours, but in Elden Ring it took me 4 hours just to reach to the first boss of the game, because there's simply so many items to collect and so many places to visit before the actual run starts. In entirety, I think the run was about 20 hours long, but I expect the upcoming Dark Souls runs to be only half as long as this one. Alright, let's get to the rules of the challenge. Rule number 1 is quite obvious. It is in the name of the challenge. There's only one type of equipment I can use as my weapon, which is shields. You got it right. Rule number 2 is something I have on all my challenge runs: no summons, no spirit ashes. I can't get help from any source. I have to beat all the challenge by myself. I was thinking I could use Great Shield Soldier Ashes, but later I decided not to. It would be fun to have a bunch of summons also using Great Shield, but that would just make the run easier. We don't want that. Rule number 3 is simple. I have to beat the entire game, but I have to beat it properly. You can skip so many bosses in this game, however I didn't want to skip any of the fancy bosses. There are 15 remembrance bosses in the game and I have to beat all 15 of them to complete the challenge. So these are the rules I have to follow. First, I start the run with a really long preparation period. I collect the shields I will use. I collect some upgrades along the way. As I said before, this took about 4 hours in total, but I cut the footage as much as possible. Before we start, if you enjoy this type of content, consider liking and subscribing. Every bit helps a lot. If you don't sub, this is who you're making sad, by the way. I just wanted to put it out there. So let's start with the run. I will not narrate this part of the video, but I will still have some text explaining on the screen what am I doing. Watch this part if you're curious about how I prepared for the challenge, but otherwise I have chapters and the timestamps. You can skip directly to the beginning of the challenge. Now, after an ungodly amount of preparation, I'm finally ready for the first boss. Margit is already an easy boss, to no surprise to anybody. With a plus 20 great shield, he becomes a total joke. You see, almost all the damage for Margit comes from his delayed attacks, but with a great shield, I don't need to worry about delayed attacks at all. I don't need to time a dodge or anything, I can just block every attack he throws. Normally when you bring a usual shield to Margit, his stamina damage is quite high, but thanks to the Scholar's shields, his attacks don't even take 5% of my stamina. I don't even mention the amount of damage my shield crash is doing. After a long preparation, Margit goes down without any issues as expected. After Margit, I can access the Stormvale Castle. However, there isn't anything important for me here. I just need to pick Iron Wetblade for my shield so I can apply heavy affinity to my weapon, and that is it. Later I will return here for a talisman, but for now I really don't need to pick up anything here, so I'm just skipping every enemy. Next on the line is Godric the Crafted. He's another one of the early game bosses. Knowing I'm way above level of this boss, I move in quite confident. He takes much less damage than Margit, but it's no big deal. I still have a plus 20 great shield and it is way above what was intended for this boss fight, so he's taking less damage than the previous boss, but I'm still doing a lot of damage. When I think of it, Godric doesn't have any dangerous attacks. All of his attacks are straightforward, just hit you in the head, throw you some fresh air, that's it. Though some of his wind attacks may be tricky to dodge and get the correct timing. However, he doesn't really put up a good fight. Using shields for the first time, you can tell by the way I'm playing that I'm not used to the great shield and I'm underestimating this shield. Even though I can just block everything, I'm still dodging attacks instead, which makes the fight a bit longer than it should have been, but no big deal. I'm way over leveled for this boss fight and there was no chance of ever failing. Next, I make my way to the academy. At this point, I'm just trying to move easy bosses out of the way so I can just get the challenging ones. There isn't much to show between Godric and Academy. I just picked up the Academy key from Dragon and I just ran past everything. Before I reach Renala, I need to beat Red Wolf. Not going to lie, this boss was such a pain when I was doing level 1 run because he would constantly run away and throw stuff at me. This is not the case with my shield run. I do way too much damage and I take no damage from his regular attacks. His sorceries kinda do damage, but even that are quite weak and really easy to avoid. So just like the previous two, Radagon goes down without even putting up a fight, and at this point I'm just thinking maybe I prepared and optimized my build a bit too much because bosses are going down really fast. After Red Wolf, I decided I have too much health and I should start investing into strength. Once that is done, I run past everything. I take my Glintstone Wetblade for cold affinity. I'm not gonna use it against Renala yet, but it is pretty much the best option I have for my shield run. Next, I bully the NPC before Renala and I make it to the next boss on the list. Renala is already the easiest of the Remembrance bosses. Going in, I had no concerns. She had low posture, her attacks are quite easy to dodge, but she put up a much better fight than I had anticipated. First phase of course goes down fast, there's nothing going on there. Her second phase, however, as if I am the boss, she is constantly running away. She always fights this way, but with a much slower weapon, this becomes a bit annoying. Of course she doesn't have enough damage to take me down, but she is just stealing my time running around. Also, she calls way more summons than I have ever had in a single Renala fight. After a while, she starts summoning the next enemy as soon as the previous one disappears. She runs around too much, but eventually she goes down. It was one fight with no chance of me failing, but she put up a good fight, constantly running away and summoning dragons, giants, wolves, whatever she can find. After Renala, I go back to Round Table and I grab my second talisman pouch. Then I go back to Altus Plateau to loot Great Shield Talisman. There's a really useful Great Shield in Caelid, but right now I don't have proper stats to use it and it is not even that powerful against the next boss on the list, so I just run past everything and make my way to Radahn. My first attempt was quite smooth until I spent too much time refreshing my buffs in the middle as Radahn was coming down as a meteor. I ended up running right into the explosion and that was my first attempt. After the embarrassing defeat, I'm ready to give Radahn another try. Beginning of the fight, I just move back until he is out of my view distance so he stops shooting arrows. I have beaten this boss the right way so many times, I don't need to deal with his arrows right now. This is already going to be a long run. Radahn is so much more difficult than any boss I have faced faced so far, but having such high max health pool, Radahn won't be able to take me down with one combo. Radahn moves around so much and he is really fast, so I had an assumption I wouldn't be able to land my attacks, but turns out I was overthinking. He's still moving out of my attacks every now and then, but thanks to the horse, Radahn's hitbox is massive. I don't do as much damage as I was doing on the previous bosses, and I also didn't swap my weapon affinity to cold yet, I simply forgot. However, the biggest advantage of this setup is that I can just trade attacks as much as I want. Thanks to the Great Shield Talisman and Scholar's Shield, I can block his attacks for days. Since Radahn is doing physical damage mostly, majority of the time I don't even take damage while trading hits. Shield Crash is not as strong as it used to be. I'm not able to proc bleed status effects, and I also can't break his posture efficiently with this weapon art. Even his heaviest hitting attacks do almost no damage, so I take down Radahn. He wasn't as difficult as I expected, but that is mainly because my max health is way too high. So he goes out of the way and I'm ready to move on. As I said before, I will first take out the easy bosses. The easiest boss of the remaining ones I can think of is Regal Ancestor's Spirit. I go back to Nokron. Since I looted everything I needed there, I just run past everything. Ahead of me is the easiest and the lamest boss in the game, myself. I wanted to see how Mimic plays with my build, so I took it slow and let him hit me. He does decent damage surprisingly, but he struggles to pick the correct attack. He is just swinging his staff every now and then. As expected, Mimic goes down before he can figure what even my build is about. Before Ancestor Spirit, I needed to light 7 braziers, so here they are. There's one tricky move with Ancestor Spirit. It can heal itself like crazy, and its hitbox doesn't help my moveset at all. So I went back to Kaelid to grab my new fancy shield. I won't be able to use its weapon art efficiently, but it is still the best option I got. So I beat the pumpkin dough, grab my Visage shield. After upgrading it as much as I can, I'm ready for the Ancestor Spirit boss fight. Fighting it was so frustrating. His legs are so tall, making it really difficult to hit with melee shield attacks. And also Shield Crash is pretty much impossible to land properly. That's why I changed the Visage shield. However, my max stamina is way too low to use it properly. But then again, I'm doing way too much damage with Shield's weapon art. I guess Ancestor Spirit is weak to fire, that's why I'm doing so much damage. Annoying part of this boss fight is not only the hitbox, but also the way he's attacking me. Most of his attacks come from above, so unless there's a little distance between us, he hits me over my shield, making my block completely useless. Another issue is healing. He healed 2 times during my boss fight. The first one got him all the way up to max health. With the second one I got lucky, there wasn't a lot of spirits, so he only got a mediocre healing. I don't enjoy boss fights when the boss is constantly running away. There are several bosses doing this in the game, but with the shield this is happening with the bosses that aren't even running away usually. At one point even Rykard got stuck in this running behavior and he just moved backwards until he ran out of space to slide backwards. Ancestor Spirit has a similar behavior. He isn't running away directly, but he's just moving around way too much. I finally took him down. Though I must say, if I wasn't using Visage Shield, this fight would have been so much longer. Before I moved to Volcano Manor, I said, why am I not activating Godric's Great Rune? So I go back and activate the rune for a massive stat boost in case I need it. Before Rykard, I have to beat Godskin Noble. This guy is not tough at all when he is by himself, so it's already an easy fight. His attacks are piercing through my shield, but damage is not high enough to put me in any danger. Godskin Noble has all kinds of weird attack timing. When you fight him, he is such a pain to get used to his attacks, but obviously I don't have that issue with Great Shield. All I have to do is using my Shield Crash right before he attacks and I will win the trades regardless. Trading hits with this build is so easy, so I get overconfident and I try attacking when I shouldn't. He almost gets me with his roll attacks, and it gets even worse from this point. I take a lot of unnecessary hits. In the end I managed to take him down, but I almost joined him in the grave. Blake Flame's damage takes stopped right before I hit 0 health, and I think I survived the fight with only 1 or 2 health points remaining. Going into Rykard's area, I had no idea how this fight would go. Surely without Serpent Hunter I wasn't going to deal a lot of damage, but I assumed my bleeding would carry me through this fight. And for the lava under Rykard, I simply have my Icon Shield and my Physic, both are giving me decent healing per second. Beginning of the fight, it goes really smooth. Serpent can't attack me when I'm right under him, and I negate the lava damage with my regeneration. For some reason, also Serpent is getting staggered so easily. I wasn't expecting this. With all things considered, fight looks so easy. I deal a lot of damage with pretty much zero risk of getting hit by something right under Rykard. Thanks to my bleeding and cold status, I managed to melt the Serpent and push it to the second phase. It wasn't nearly as difficult as I expected, however it all goes down in the second phase. When Rykard wakes up, boss's moveset changes entirely, slow Serpent attacks are gone now, and I have Rykard summoning homing skulls, attacking with his sword all the time. As long as I'm under the Serpent, he can't hit me, but the second phase Rykard has a new move. He can just jump backwards and create distance. He does this way too often, and I find myself chasing Rykard half the time. Though that is not the only issue, Rykard's hitbox are pretty much non-existent. Half of his body have pretty much no hitbox, and the lava is also staggering me aggressively. Right before I finish my attacks, I always get staggered by lava. It is just unfortunate timing, but I decided I need more poise and a better plan for this boss fight. I ended up running away, and I will come back to Rykard for later when I have a better setup and better build. I was exclusively using my jump attacks against Rykard, so naturally I go back to Stormveil and grab my Cloak Talisman for some extra damage of my jump attacks, but I have no intention to go back to Rykard yet. Next I wanted to go to Leyndell and get some fancy upgrades for myself. First I need to beat the Tree Sentinel in order to get to Leyndell. He has a lot of health and he does more damage than any boss I have beaten up until this point, so he has to be difficult, right? Well, not really. He's so easily staggered by the shield crash, and as long as I'm blocking, he doesn't do respectable damage. Though I got greedy and I got hit a lot of times during the fight. He also got really close to taking me down a couple times, but I ended up beating him without issues, all thanks to the stagger that comes with the shield crash, and now I can access Leyndell. In Leyndell I have couple places to visit, but right now my first priority is getting the Lionel set. It is the easiest heavy set I can get at the moment. It is just couple minutes of running around and I reach the location where the set can be found. While I was already in Leyndell, I decided I should just finish this area and be done with it. I just need to kill 2 simple bosses, and by doing this I will unlock new massive areas. So I make my way to the Godfrey's boss fight. I made a big mistake and I gathered the whole town behind me right before the boss fight, and the worst thing I can think of happens. One of them follows me into the boss room and refuses to leave me alone. After the messy start, I couldn't manage to recover and Godfrey took me down right there. On my second try, I thought I started the recording, but turns out I wasn't recording at all. But luckily I realized it before I took the boss down and I started my recording, so sorry about that. At this point it happens once in every challenge video I upload. It'll probably happen on the next ones too, so prepare yourself for some missing footages. Next on the list is Morgoth. On my first attempt I got so unlucky and got hit by every random sword that was raining from above. He's pretty much a glass cannon. He has low poise and he also has low health, but he attacks non-stop and he does so much damage. If I made this video a couple months ago, this could be one of the easiest fights in the entire video, but Shield Crash doesn't have as much stagger damage anymore, so I don't get to stun him as often. He also does holy damage in addition to his physical damage, which means I take a lot of damage from some of his attacks even when I block them. As I said, he is constantly on attack, and when I find a little window to attack, he dashes behind me. So it's a bit painful to fight him using shield, but eventually I find some openings and I punish him for that. He does so much damage, and if the boss fight goes on for a while, he will become a big problem. But thanks to his low health pool, I managed to take him down before he can actually start doing some real damage. After Morgoth, I can leave Leyndell, however there are some items I want to pick up before I leave. So I go to sewers, I want to grab Mohg's shackle and also the fingerprint stone shield. Once again, this shield is not as powerful as it used to be, but it still offers the best stats for my build, though there's one tiny issue. To get the shield I have to beat the discount version of Mohg. This version of Mohg is nowhere near as powerful as his final form, but this is one boss I never underestimate. I was hoping I could do a lot of damage with Visage Shield's weapon art, but he either has so much fire resistance or Visage Shield is exceptionally bad against him. However, I didn't want to change my shield mid-fight since the other shield is also no good against him. It is simply not good enough to proc bleed on Mohg, so I stick to my Visage Shield regardless. Because my weapon art is not working against him, I decided I have to do this the old way. I slowly take his health bar down by doing charged heavies, jump attacks and some light attacks if I even get an opening. He's not taking a lot of damage, but he also doesn't have a lot of attack, so I'm not having hard time. This version of Mohg is usually not as difficult. He still puts up a good fight, but he eventually goes down. After Mohg, I do some platforming to grab my fancy shield, but I have no idea where the footage is. I had 248 clips in total and they're almost 300 gigabytes, so I assume I just deleted the footage when I was deleting unnecessary ones. Anyways, once I get the shield, I move to the mountaintop of the giant. There are some fancy items here, but I don't need any of them for my current playthrough, so I skip everything and I reach the fire giant. Fire giant is a pain whenever I do a challenge run. When I was doing the level 1 run, I had to try at least 20 times before I beat him. He didn't push me as hard in this challenge, but he was still a pain. You would assume hitting a giant would be easy, but even his slightest movement creates so much distance that I was constantly missing my attacks. Finding an opening while fighting with nothing but a shield was so difficult against him. This fight was more frustrating than anything else. Once I finally got an opportunity to hit him, I could only do a couple attacks, but even that was barely happening. Using the shield defensively against him was almost impossible. All of his attacks are naturally coming from above and shield can't block them from that angle unless I get really lucky with my positioning. Luckily, giant's attacks are so easy to read and they can be avoided so easily, so all I have to do is just keep dodging his attacks and deal a bit of damage on any chance I get. It becomes worse when he starts rolling all over the place. I run after him all the time only for him to instantly roll away again. His second phase, however, it is packed with much more action. Now he doesn't have a constantly open weak spot, his leg is gone. Now his hands and eye are taking a lot of damage, but I can barely get the opportunity to attack those weak spots. Even though I should go for the hand, I was mainly attacking his leg because attacking his hand is such a pain. He is always moving his hand, and even though I could do more damage to his hand, his leg is always there, always open for the attacks. So knowing I would do less damage to his legs, I still go for the leg. I was slowly building status effects and avoiding as many attacks as I could in the process. After a long painful fight, I finally took down the fire giant and I can move to the next zone. After Fire Giant, I decided to go to Crumbling Farum Azula and take out the mandatory boss I need for the challenge. I had a lot of options to follow, but Azula seemed to be the best option for me. I could finally upgrade my shield to plus 25. But before going there, I wanted to grab another fancy Great Shield for my build. Erdtree Great Shield is a great choice against any type of caster enemy, and I was planning to use it on Godskin Duo, so I went back and killed 3 sentinels. Luckily, I only pulled one of them at a time. I don't know how I did it, but this made the fight infinitely easier. Godskin Duo is an annoying fight. I don't like fighting even one of them, and now I have to beat 2 at the same time. Normally with sleep arrows or sleep pods, the fight is easy, but I was simply not allowed to use them for obvious reasons. I can only use my shield. On my first attempt, I tried to kill them with Erdtree Great Shield, but it was so slow and boring. They wouldn't throw their fireballs half the time, and when they did, they would throw it at the exact same time, and I would always end up taking damage from one while I'm deflecting the other one. I'm not even mentioning how little damage Earth 3 Great Shield was doing. Naturally, I go back to my main shield and beat the bosses the old-fashioned way again. It was definitely a difficult fight, but it wasn't as painful as I expected. Next is Malekith. When I was playing Elden Ring for the first time, Malekith was so difficult for me. I could barely make it past this first phase, though after so many playthroughs and understanding the game even more, Malekith became one of the most comfortable bosses in the game for me. First phase is really easy, he only does physical damage, he is attacking a lot but he simply can't pass my shield with only physical damage, so naturally Shield Crash totally dominates the first phase of the fight. Second phase however is where things get messy. Every attack takes chunks of my health bar. Even when I block I lose way too much health and blocking becomes a huge pain for me, so I try to avoid as many attacks as I can and I attack on any chance I get. He almost took me down, but luckily I managed to beat Malekith, though I must say his second phase was the most difficult fight in this challenge so far, entirely because of how powerful his attacks against blocking targets. Once Malekith was out of the way, I could go to any of the remaining bosses in any order I wanted. I decided to go back to Rykard before I was too overleveled for that guy. I had much higher poise, I had higher damage, and now I had much more healing than my first try on him. On this attempt I decided to try my weapon art rather than the jump attacks. Jump attacks are amazing if you want to break Serpent's posture, but the thing is, I don't get a lot of damage boost for stunning him. Also, in this phase he can't hit me anyway, so stunning him really doesn't benefit me all that much. I tried Shield Crash on this attempt and turns out lava doesn't stagger me during its animation. This by itself allowed me to deal so much damage in such short time. Just like in my first attempt, the Serpent phase has no real threat to me. Only thing that damages me is the lava, and even that doesn't hurt me a lot thanks to the two different sources of regeneration I have. Even in this nerf state, Shield Crash is still applying bleed and cold status effects quite often against Serpent, so I'm taking down his health bar almost even faster than I could with Serpent Hunter. Second phase starts and I know hitboxes are complete joke in the Rykard phase. However, I realized that for some reason his legs are taking way too much damage. I mean more damage compared to the other parts of his body. So I decided for the entirety of the second phase I will only attack his legs if it's possible. Problem with the second phase is, if I take too long he starts summoning skulls and the fight becomes extremely chaotic. So I needed to be fast and effective. He jumps back every now and then, but luckily he didn't get stuck on the sliding backwards animation this time, and he was leaving his leg vulnerable often enough for me to chunk down his health bar. I was expecting this fight to become really messy, but I got an amazing RNG on this try. He didn't try to run away from me or summon skulls all that often. Fight goes really smooth and I end up taking him down without any issues. At this point I'm going back and forth all over the map. Next I decided to clear the remaining of the Leyndell bosses before I go to the optional remaining bosses. It is never not funny to absolutely destroy Gideon Ofnir. I could use my spiked shield, but I decided to bring the heavy guns and I'm using Fingerprint Stone Shield against him. He is the only boss I can make use of the Madness proc on the Fingerprint Stone Shield, so I decided to enjoy the moment. It is really unfair that Madness builds are so fun and interesting, but they are not effective against vast majority of the bosses. Anyways, after satisfying fight against Gideon I can move on. Next I decided to challenge Godfrey. My choice of shield against Godfrey was Visage Shield. It doesn't do a lot of damage against Godfrey or anything. I just wanted to use something different. I don't know about his Earthquake attack, but other than that one, he always does physical damage only, so Great Shield is an amazing tool against him. Only issue is that this shield's weapon art consumes too much stamina. It is not an issue against bosses that aren't aggressive like Ancestor Spirit, but Godfrey has some of the longest attack chains in the game. So once he starts attacking, he doesn't stop for a while. Though it is not a big deal, I just need to release my block every now and then to gain some stamina back, and then I'm right back in the action. You can tell by my health point that Visage Shield is doing an amazing job holding Godfrey back. Shield has 100% damage reduction against physical attacks, so Godfrey literally can't deal damage as long as I'm holding my block. Even his Earthquake attack doesn't do anything against me, and surprisingly my weapon art is also breaking his posture. First phase, even though my my damage output is nothing special. He goes down smoothly, however the second phase is completely a different story. He goes full berserk on his second phase. He has so many new attacks and half of them are grab attacks, meaning if I hold my block he will grab me and smack me all over the place. Not only this does so much damage, but also anytime he is charging his grab attack, I need to cancel my attacks and run for my life. Starting and finishing this shield's weapon art is really slow, so I can't just use it until the last second and then dodge attacks. I have to be really careful. Because of this one drawback, my damage on the second phase is not as high as it was on the first phase. After Godfrey, I wanted to go to Deeproot Depths. This made the most sense for me because going through Deeproot Depths was going to allow me to fight 2 Remembrance bosses, Lich Dragon 46 and Astel, the moderator of Discord. To reach Deeproot Depths, first I have to defeat Gargoyle Duo. On my level 1 run, this was a complete nightmare, but turns out they're not tough at all when you're properly leveled. I was doing so much damage with each hit, and they simply didn't do enough damage to kill me, so I was simply worried for nothing. I took them down easily and I unlocked Deeproot. When I made it to Deeproot, reality struck me. To fight 46, I have to do Fia's questline. But guess what, I haven't done a single questline in the game so far. That is why I'm also missing Shard of Alexander, cause I have no idea where he is. I rushed to Fia's location to face the harsh truth, but something amazing happened. Fia's champions were waiting for me. I never thought I would be so happy seeing a bunch of weak NPCs as a boss fight, but they were there, so I gladly accepted their challenge and took them down one after another. Great Shield were always so powerful in PvP, and they do so much damage against NPCs. After the fight, Fia is waiting right in front of me. Turns out you can skip majority of Fia's questline and you can still complete it. She asked me to bring the curse mark of that, so I go back to Divine Tower of Lernia after picking the hourglass from Rani. With that quest is complete, I can fight 46. At first I thought I blew the entire run and I wasn't going to trigger this boss fight when I realized I forgot about the questline, but thankfully he is right in front of me. 46 is such a cool boss, but he was never a memorable dragon for me. He didn't have the charm of Dark Eater Midair and even Placidus X, maybe because his design is too similar to all other dragons in Farum Azula. Anyways, I'm clearly over leveled for this boss since I'm doing way too much damage, but there's one issue: his legs are too tall, just like the ancestor spirit, and he is spinning around way too much when I go under him, so I decided to try a different shield to see how it goes. I swapped to One-Eyed Shield, and this was the best decision I made yet. Shield's weapon art is amazing against 46. I was struggling to hit his legs, but now I can easily get some headshots without even moving. Anytime I landed a shot on his head with the Flame Spit Ash of War, it was doing so much damage. I could never expect the shield to be so effective against him, but this shield was absolutely destroying 46. Once in a while he starts flying and then does a fancy dive attack, but I can just block it and it doesn't even deal proper damage. Thanks to the One-Eyed Shield, 46 becomes one of the easiest bosses I fought in this playthrough so far. Next on the list is Astel, another boss that I thought would be locked behind a questline, but once again I was able to reach the boss without following a questline. Astel is a cool boss. He has so many amazing attacks and he can even be terrifying at times, but on my attempt he didn't go for his fancy grab attacks. I was disappointed that he didn't use his flashy moves, but at the same time I think I'm glad that he didn't destroy my health bar with those moves. Now when it comes to the actual fight, Astel wasn't difficult. I had one minor issue. Hitting his head with Shield Crash was really difficult, but I figured that it is better that I don't use Shield Crash anyway. He does a lot of magic damage, so constantly blocking attacks is not a good idea against him. Also, one other thing I overlooked was Frostbite. Astel is immune to Frostbite, or at least that is what the wiki says, but you can never really trust that wiki, so who knows if it's correct or not. Anyways, assuming information there is true, my weapon affinity is completely useless against Astel and I should have swapped it to heavy affinity instead, but I didn't do that. and it doesn't matter, it's not the end of the world. Despite the minor inconvenience, the boss fight is still easy and I made it past Estelle without issues. Next I decided it is finally time to take down Moog, the real one, not the sewer Moog. Once again, I don't need to do questline to reach him. There's a portal on the western side of the mountaintops of the giants. Taking the portal sends you directly to Moogwing Palace. Now with all the easy bosses out of the way, it is finally time I start challenging the big two. Moog and Malenia are two bosses I almost always struggle with, so moving in I knew I was going to face a really difficult boss fight. So I was prepared for Moog, I had the shackle ready, I had my wondrous physic ready, so what could possibly go wrong? Well, let me tell you, a lot can go wrong in the Moog boss fight. This is one boss I think if I never played Dark Souls games, I could have had an easier time against him. It is almost like From Software carefully designed this boss to mess with Dark Souls players' muscle memory, because the way he delays his attacks, he always catches me off guard. Good part is, his delayed attacks are not a problem for me when my entire personality is a great shield, though the bad part is simply everything else. His fire attacks hurt a lot and he does them quite often compared to the sewer Moog. Worst thing is when he starts that fire blood rain thingy, if I get stuck on an animation while he's doing the attack, I just take way too much damage and I just don't have enough healing to trade my way through this boss fight. Real problem starts with his second phase. I always have difficult time fighting him on his second phase. It is not the attacks themselves, but the way he is covering the ground with flames. If I take too long, I eventually get cornered and die, so I try to find openings and I constantly run to a part of the area where he hasn't covered in flames yet. I have some health recovery, but it is only useful if I'm blocking physical attacks and taking a tiny bit of damage. Sadly, it is not the case with Moog. He hits like a truck, and if I take one wrong step and move into the flames, I take bunch of unnecessary damage. If I fought him before all the nerfs to shield crash, this fight would have been much easier and faster, but in its current state, shield charge is nowhere near as powerful as it once was. As always, Moog is never an easy fight. I finally managed to beat him after a couple tries, and I can finally move on to the next boss on the list. Well guys, there's no point in delaying it any further, and it's not like I can delay it anymore anyways. It is finally time I make my way to Malenia. I need to take down Loretta before Malenia, but she is not a big deal. She is easy to read and her attacks leave her vulnerable often. I thought about beating her with Earth 3 Great Shield, but there's no point in roleplaying. I spent way too much time in this challenge already, and now that I'm close to the end, I just want to be done with it. After all, there's a good chance I may get stuck on Malenia, so I just make quick work of Loretta with Fingerprint Stone Shield. Time has come, I finally made it to Malenia. This is the part I could get stuck for days or even I could straight up give up, but after failing to beat her multiple times, I figured I can just stun lock her. Normally when you stun her, she dashes backwards to create distance and she recovers immediately, but the thing is, if I can lure her to the entrance of the boss room, she won't have enough room to dash backwards. By simply following this strategy, I managed to push her to the second phase without even giving her a chance to strike back, so just enjoy the footage of me bullying Malenia. I tried the same tactic in the second phase, but sadly it doesn't work. She has a different recovery animation during her second form. Now instead of dashing backwards, she quickly recovers and then she dashes sideways to kick me in the face. So as much as I hoped fight would be as easy as it was in the first phase, it sadly wasn't. Now she is much more aggressive, she can't be stunned as easily, and if I open myself to attacks while doing my shield charge, not only I lose way too much health, she also heals herself a lot. I can't stun her efficiently, but also I can't trade damage because I will only lose health while while she is healing herself like crazy. No matter what, trades hurt me way more than they hurt her. So what I do instead is quite the big brain strategy. I run around like a headless chicken until she does a certain attack, then I hit her with a jump attack when she is open for hits. Next is simple, I start running around again until I get opening. I spent more time in Malenia fight than Rykard or even Fire Giant. I thought Malenia was leaving herself vulnerable a lot in her second phase, but I was mistaken. I can almost never get a decent opening to land some hits, and even when I do, damage is simply pathetic. Because I spend too much time between hits, bleed and cold status effects are almost never there. On this playthrough, my Malenia experience became really weird. First phase was so much easier than any other of my playthroughs, but the second phase literally became a nightmare for me. I eventually took her down, but this was definitely the most exhausting and difficult fight in the entire challenge as expected. After Malenia, I was relieved that the hard part of the challenge was done and I could finally go and finish the game. Right before I went to Radagon, I decided to check my list of bosses just in case I'm missing something, and turns out I somehow forgot the coolest dragon since Midir. Placidus X is still out there waiting for me. Normally I wasn't going to delay this fight so much, but right after Medicat I tried Placidus X multiple times and I failed miserably. Then I decided to just leave him for later. Then you know what happened, I forgot his existence entirely. My early attempts were failing because I was doing such little damage and the damage numbers were just mentally pushing me into a more aggressive playstyle, which was resulting me taking bunch of unnecessary damage. I'm still doing the same amount of damage as I did on my earlier attempts, but now I have better understanding of the fight and I'm not rushing just to get some extra hits. I love Placidus X as a boss and I also love his lore, but there's something missing in this boss fight. It is so cinematic, the fight looks amazing and feels so epic. Animations are amazing, sound design is amazing, everything about this boss fight is simply amazing, but it is missing the difficulty. On the technical side, I think this fight is superior to Midir's fight from Dark Souls 3. Midir was making players run after him too much, since his attacks were covering way too much distance. It is not the case with Placidus X, he doesn't make you run after him all the time like Midir or the Elden Beast, but the issue with Placidus X is he's simply not a difficult boss. As much as I love the visuals and the fight itself, I think he deserves a much more difficult boss fight. I don't know if we will ever get a chance to fight Prime form of Placidus X in a DLC or something, but that is something I would love to see. Placidus X in his full glory would make the best dragon fight in the entire Souls series, so fingers crossed maybe we will get to fight his Prime form, or we may even get a superior dragon with the upcoming DLCs. Anyways, back to the fight, he doesn't seem like taking a lot of damage, but he doesn't move as much as the other bosses, so I get to hit him more often and I get more opportunity to take down his health bar. Placidus X is strong against every single damage type in the game. Bleed, poison, fire, holy, nothing is particularly strong against this guy. The only thing that he is weak to is pierce damage, according to a questionable wiki that is definitely not filled with random information to keep you reading while boosting views on an embedded random stream. Definitely that is not the case, so once again I assume that information on wiki is correct. After a long fight, I take down Placido's X, and now I just need to kill 2 simple bosses, then I'm done with the entire challenge. Radagon is one boss that I had a hard time on my first playthrough, then I got used to his moveset later. My level 1 run helped me a lot understanding his moveset. Now I'm still a bit rusty since I haven't played Elden Ring properly in the past couple months, but other than some badly timed dodges, I'm not taking a lot of hits from Radagon. Just like Malekith, he also has low poise and low health, so all I have to do is just bait him into his physical attacks and then hit him back with the shield charge anytime I get an opportunity. Radagon becomes extremely aggressive if you create distance, so when fighting him you should always be right on top, constantly pushing towards him. Trust me, dodging towards him and being close to him all the times makes this fight so much easier than running backwards and creating distance. He hits me a couple times, but that is mainly because of my badly timed dodges and simply not taking him seriously. I end up beating him easily, and now the last fight of the challenge begins. I died to Elden Beast once because of how annoying his fighting style is, but now on my second attempt I know what is dangerous in this fight. With shield I don't do enough damage, and the issue is he's constantly running away. I mean, he's running away non-stop, and when I'm chasing a boss for 5 minutes straight while he's slowly hitting me with 1 or 2 of his hundreds of projectiles, I eventually run out of healing and he just wins the battle of attrition. My main issue here is not being able to take him down fast enough. He goes all the way to the other side of the area and he gets some lucky hits on me with his random projectiles, and I just lose a bunch of health without even being able to hit him back. Whenever he decides to go for finally some melee attacks, he leaves himself vulnerable, and that gives me opportunity to do a lot of charged heavy attacks. As much as he is annoying to fight, he is still not a difficult boss. His attacks are so easy to avoid, the fight just becomes frustrating after running after him for so long. But despite all that, he's still an easy boss, so he goes down and I can finally finish the challenge. This was a really long and at times painful challenge, but I do it entirely because I love Souls games and I love the challenge that comes with them. I will keep doing more of these videos. Next video will be Dark Souls 3 Shield Run, and after that comes Dark Souls 2 then 1. If you enjoy these videos, consider liking and subscribing. It helps so much both to my channel and to me motivationally. Also consider sharing your opinions, ideas and criticism in the comment section. I read and react to all the comments, and I also try to always improve my videos anytime I make a new one, so your criticism helps a lot. Anyway, this was all for today. Thanks for watching and see you on the next video.